Okay, so welcome. Today we have, or tonight in Belfast, today in Boston, or sorry, Philadelphia and Boston, we have Phil Scarito, who is an internationally sought master level instructor of the kettlebell, barbell bodyweight training, and also Indian clubs, who, well, we're going to get a brief run through of those tonight. Phil is also an FMS, functional movement screen contracted lecturer, also a special consultant to many professional teams in America, athletes, and all other coaching staff, as well as special operations units and individuals within the United States of America. Welcome, Phil. Everybody here is also really looking forward to having you here and for you to show us some of the DV8 system in its best, and take it away.
All right, Finn, thank you, and good evening to all of you. Good afternoon to some of you. It's a pleasure, it's an honor to be here. I just have to say before I start that the fact that you know, you have a coach like Finn who is providing this service, I think is invaluable. And I think it's just pretty cool to be able to have that as part of training with Finn, and taking advantage of a lot of different speakers and their different perspectives on fitness and training. So I appreciate that. I appreciate you allowing me to be here. So today we're gonna talk about mobility, which is something that everybody seeks in some way. No matter who you are, where you come from, what your background is, what tool you use for training, everybody is always trying to gain more mobility. Now, I'm going to take a different approach to this, and to mobility itself. And the approach is some of the things that we're going to discuss today. You might have heard of, maybe some of the tools you've never heard of, and maybe the approach to gaining more mobility is a little bit different. And these are things, by the way, that I use every single day with myself and with my students. So we're going to talk Indian clubs, which is an ancient form of an ancient tool that has become more popular. We're going to talk about a bodyweight movement called the hinge to squat, which I find to be, this is something I teach in my certification. And it's just a different way to approach teaching the squat. And a lot of people use it as a mobility drill, just to kind of get warmed up and to see how the body's feeling before your session begins. And then I'm going to talk about the farmer carry. So this is not when you typically think of a farmer carry, and we're going to discuss what that is, but that's basically holding two bells or two dumbbells or anything to your side. You wouldn't typically think that is a mobility drill, but it is. It is. And these are things that I use, like I said, every single day with all of my students. Everybody approaches mobility in their own way, but the bottom line is that mobility needs to be addressed in every session, in my opinion. It's very hard to address the mobility idea or gaining more mobility without really talking about posture. All right, and they both go together. And for somebody who doesn't have great posture, and we can define what that is because it's going to be different for everybody. These are things that you'll notice right away. And if you video yourself in your training sessions, you'll notice things like, you know, I'm going to go profile view here, but you'll notice a forward head posture, rounded shoulders, the spine may be flexed. These are things that you'll notice in your own training. But if you're a coach, you should be addressing this and within every single session with your student, well before you even think about going overhead or doing any overhead movements with a bar, kettlebell, dumbbell, anything at all. So we want to be able to address those issues first. And that could be from simple as breathing. Breathing can be a way to address mobility. Rolling on the ground, clubs, Indian clubs that we're going to talk about now. So there's a lot of different ways you can go about it, but let's get into the Indian club movements itself. Not all of you may be familiar with these, but I'm just going to show you what they look like. They kind of look like bowling pins, right? And when you first look at them, your first reaction is, well, how could these help me with my posture and my mobility? But this is by far one of the best tools I've ever found and have used to increase the range of motion safely within the shoulder, to help people that have had neck issues or neck surgeries. Again, we're not working through pain. So if there's pain present, obviously you're going to address that with the clinician, but to increase your range of motion, to get you ready for any overhead movements, whether it's a bench press or any overhead movements, this is going to be your go-to. And I'm going to talk briefly about just the circular motions and why they're so important to increasing the range of motion. But one of the other things I love about the Indian club is that when you put the club in someone's hand, it's, you know, with everybody I've used this with, they kind of, they become very laser focused on what they're doing. So it's really hard to think about other things that are going on when you have clubs in your hand. And that's a good aspect. That's one of the better aspects of the Indian club training, is that you're not only working on your posture and your mobility, but you're working on your mindset. You're working on really paying attention to what's going on around you. And I think that could be a whole nother discussion when it comes to training, but a lot of people become distracted when they train. And this allows you to kind of get focused on what you're doing. So this is an Indian club. They all come in different shapes. There's wooden ones, there's plastic ones, some are longer. These are 3/4 pound. So they're not very heavy. I train mostly with 1 pound clubs because I'm not going heavier simply because I'm trying to release the tension in my body. You train with barbells, you train with kettlebells, you already have a lot of tension within your body. So the objective here is to release that tension using these circular motions. Now, if you think of your typical training in a day, you're doing a lot of linear movements, right? You're pressing horizontal, you're pressing overhead. You don't get a lot of circular motions in your training, and that's where the Indian club is so beneficial. It breaks up all of those patterns that you do on a daily basis. So let me show you, I'm in a seated position here, and you could do this seated. You can replicate what I'm doing with your arms, so you don't necessarily need clubs. So I'm going to show you without clubs first, and then we'll get into with the clubs. So what I want you to do is just bring your hands in front of you, act as if you're holding the club, but you're not clenching your fists. It's a nice relaxed grip, okay? Elbows are in towards the body. And what I want you to do is I want you to try to think about initiating this movement with your elbows. So you're almost creating this semicircle. And what you're going to do is you're going to take this movement and you're going to take the bottom or your hand and wrap it around your head, just like this, almost like you're doing this with your hair, okay? And then when you get to this position, your elbows are off to the side. So if I do a profile view, you'll see me where I am right here. They're right off to the side. And from here, you're going to extend your arms overhead, almost like you're yawning or you're reaching up overhead. And then you're simply going to let the arms fall all the way down, crossing the arms here and back to this home position again. So I'm going to back up here so you can see me a little bit better. So the arm position is here, almost like a kettlebell rack, but with no tension. You're going to pull the elbows in, go around the ear, open up the elbows, reach up nice and high like you're stretching, and then extend the arms all the way out to your side, all the way to the bottom, and then bring it back to this position again. So just doing that without a club, you should feel something like you're moving the shoulder girdle. You're actually getting around maybe some issues that you have within the shoulder. So if you are on this call and you have stuff going on with the shoulder, I'd be very curious to see how this feels, this movement in itself, just doing this unloaded with just your arm. Now, if we continue this, right, and we continue this pattern, this circular pattern, you can see that my hand is tracing a circle. So if I had markers on the end of my hands, I'm tracing the circle all the way down through the bottom. And so as I start using clubs in this movement, just watch for a second, you can see how it creates these circular patterns. And all I'm doing here is creating a smaller circle inside a larger circle. That's it. So this is an excellent way to break the normal training patterns that you experience day to day. So now you're adding some circular motion to your training, which is very unusual. Most people don't get that. And there's the benefits to these, as you'll hopefully notice if you train with clubs. You've already noticed the difference. But within a session or two, you'll feel a difference in your shoulders. And guess what? You're addressing mobility because now you're starting to stand up taller. Your posture's improved. Your shoulders are back to where they're supposed to be. And now your body's able to function more efficient. And that's ultimately what we're going for here is, this tool alone will help your barbell training, your bodyweight training, your kettlebell training, and just be feeling better day to day, especially if you're at an office and you're sitting down all day. This is a simple tool that you can grab and use and just do this at your desk. You can just follow the same pattern over and over again and kind of break that pattern of just sitting and getting your shoulders locked up and rounded. Because listen, gravity's always pulling you down, right? You're always fighting gravity. So the more that you can get yourself out of that position, right? Out of this position that most of us are in all day, the better your body's going to function. So eventually the goal with Indian clubs is not necessarily to go heavier. The goal is trying to let the weight of this club pull your arms through the movement. So you end up becoming, instead of you controlling the club is moving your arms through the movement. And you really start to kind of zone out and get really focused on what you're doing. And for those of you, I know Finn uses them. I know Kevin have used them. I know Paul has used them. What are your thoughts on it and just using them if you do on a daily basis, or how has it helped your training in general?
Me personally, I can't emphasize that one movement that you showed there enough, purely from, I'm the type of person, we know each other well, Phil. I'm the type of person who is always quite skeptical of these type of things, or whenever you first showed me them, I was just and then it wasn't, I'll be brutally honest, but yeah. I'm not really, me, I'm not one to kind of brag on the gimmicks or anything. I'm very straight and narrow, but whenever you show me this, I instantly got relief from shoulder, from just really focusing on that one movement and that one movement pattern. Yeah. Then it really hit home with me last year whenever I had a minor tear in my right rotator cuff and I couldn't move my rotator cuff through the linear position or through the natural position. The only position I could move it was in a circular pattern. And I must have accumulated hundreds of that one movement without a club, just by body weight, on a daily basis. And I think it did actually help with the recuperation and recovery of my shoulder, definitely. Yeah,
that's good.
So
yeah, go ahead.
Help.
Yeah, it's that's the thing, is that you'll find that so many people in general have shoulder issues, and the shoulder is related to, I think, in my opinion, just poor posture. Now, you may have tears or rotator cuff injuries, but really it has a lot to do with the posture that you came in with. And it could be that you never addressed that issue with the posture, and you put yourself in an overhead position that your shoulder was not ready for. And there that's how you develop your injury. So it's a really nice tool to be able to, like I said, break the traditional patterns that you do every day. And kind of, I always think of it as a reset. Every single rep is a reset. It just gets you back to where your body wants to be. And by swinging these clubs in this circular pattern, I've noticed within a session, students start to stand upright and their head goes back to where it's supposed to be. And especially those that come in with a forward posture. And it's interesting because I had a student recently that when the minute they walked into my facility, I'm always kind of looking to see how they walk, how they stand. And the one thing I noticed, and you'll notice this with the older population, is that they tend to look down. They tend to look down. A lot of people tend to look down. And that movement with the head looking down will start to pull everything in this direction. And it just exaggerates that bad posture position. So just moving the clubs in that circular motion and putting the eyes in a certain position, you'll start noticing a huge difference in how somebody stands. And that's within one session. It doesn't take long. But again, this is a way to address the mobility that a lot of people are having a hard time with. It will make a difference in your training overall. And it's something you can't do really too much of because it's light. It's not something that you do 5 minutes, you're going to feel it, but your body's not going to be beat up. It's very different than what you traditionally are training with. All right. And again, remember, you don't necessarily need the club. You can do this with your arms, just this motion here, right? This is called the inside out pattern, by the way. This is called the inside and then out. That's it. So just think of those circular motions and practice it just daily. Just go through it body weight and see how it feels. Good. Any questions on the club? And this is a very short introduction to this. But that one move, that inside out, I find to be one of the most beneficial movements. And there's many different movements you can learn within Indian clubs, but that one movement alone has really helped a lot of people deal with a lot of shoulder issues and regain range of motion. All right, any questions? Okay, so the next thing I want to discuss is something that I talk about in my certification, and that is the hinge to squat. Now, I use this to teach the squat, okay? I use this to teach the squat. And not everybody feels comfortable squatting, okay? For various reasons. Either they got injured squatting prior, and they don't want to get into that movement pattern again because there's a lot of apprehension there, which makes sense. Or people have knee issues or ankle issues or hip issues. There's a lot of things that can happen within the squat. Yeah, Finn.
Just quickly, sorry to backtrack, but Katja has asked a question. Before you move on into this, just in case it gets lost, really, Katja has asked, what weight of Indian clubs do you recommend for beginners?
Excellent question. I would say 1 pound is your go-to, 1 pound club. And I would say they're not easy to find online. But if you do, try to get a wooden pair instead of a plastic. And only because the wood moves within the hand easier. Plastic, you tend to over grip it because it sticks within the hand. And again, you want to get rid of all this tension. You don't want to keep it in. You want to release it. So anything that's going to keep that grip nice and loose is what you want to go for. That's a great question. Good. So back to the squatting. There's a lot of things that can come up with the squat. And I know Dan John, a good friend of mine who teaches the squat from the bottom up. Brilliant. Great way. And you've seen the goblet squat many times. Excellent way to teach the squat from the bottom up. This is an interesting approach. I'm going from the top down. And I'm going from the top down unloaded first. Because what I want to figure out is I want to get somebody in a position they feel comfortable getting into a squat. All right. And the way we're going to access that is through the deadlift, through the hinge. Okay. And this allows us the opportunity to figure out where our stance is, take our time with the movement. And I'm a big believer in teaching someone how to deadlift first, how to hinge first, and then get to them into the squat instead of going right to the squat. Because their hips are used to the flexion. We can talk about the foot position and gripping the floor and breathing. We can hit all of those very important aspects in the hinge. So by the time they get to the squat, now their hips just have to move in a different direction. That's it. So it allows me the opportunity to teach several things through the hinge and then access the squat at that moment. And I'm gonna demonstrate this so you can see what I'm doing here. All right, so just make sure, I think everybody can see me here. I'm gonna back up. So this is what it looks like. I'm gonna start in my deadlift position. So I'm gonna assume my deadlift stance, okay? And all I'm gonna do is go into my hinge, okay? And then I'm gonna drop my hips to wherever I feel comfortable, and then I'm gonna stand up. So it's hinge as far as I can, squat as deep as I can, wherever I feel comfortable, and then I'm gonna stand from there. So let me go from a different direction here. So I'm going to hinge, squat, stand. All right, and this is a great way to increase your mobility within the hips, the hip flexors, a lot of things going on here. Now, somebody will say, well, I don't squat in my deadlift stance. So if my deadlift stance is here about shoulder width, and I'm going into here, and I go into my squat, that feels a little uncomfortable for me. Well, guess what? This gives you an opportunity to now narrow your stance, because see, I can still narrow my stance. So now I'm within shoulder width and I can still hinge, but now when I go into my squat, it feels more comfortable, okay? And for someone who has experienced squatting, this will make a little more sense because you're used to your foot position and where you're supposed to be. But let's imagine somebody who's brand new to squatting, who doesn't squat. This gives you the option to kind of move around and see, all right, how do you feel at the bottom? Do you feel closer together? Your feet are closer together, that feels better for you? Or is it wider? And as a coach, I'm sure you've dealt with this, trying to figure out what's the best stance for the person who squats before we get into loading it. So this gives you that opportunity to kind of play around with the foot position, and then find that exact position that you feel most powerful coming up out of that hole, just like you would in that goblet squat. We're just now adding the deadlift hinge into it, right? So what eventually I'll do here is start with a normal deadlift stance, go a little bit narrower, still go into the hinge, drop into the squat, and then stand up. And I'll find whatever is comfortable for that particular student, okay? And then that's the stance that I will eventually load up, okay? Now, how do I load this position? Well, I'm gonna take a bell that's relatively light. I'm not worried about going heavy right now. This is more of a mobility, more of a kind of a warm-up, but also you're training two patterns in one movement. So I'm gonna hold the bell like this, palm out, okay? So bottoms up. And what I'm gonna do is I'm going to guide that bell back into my hinge as if I was doing a kettlebell swing, okay? Now, as I squat, I'm gonna curl myself underneath that bell. So guess what? Now I'm in the what? Bottom position, goblet squat. Now I come up. So that load, not only does it train the hinge pattern, but it allows me to have a counterbalance, and it allows my body to understand I need to pull myself underneath that before I stand up. So your goal eventually is to pattern this with a bell, medium-sized, light to medium-sized bell, and find out what's the most comfortable stance for you coming up out of that squat. And I found this to be a very, very effective way to teach the squat, because in my experience, when you have somebody, you could give the best cues in the world and all the drills, but if someone doesn't feel comfortable squatting, none of those are going to work because they have a fear of squatting, right? But if I access it from a hinge, then I just say, all right, now all you have to do, drop your hips. That's it. Just the hips move in a different direction. And now you're coming up out of that hole. And you'll be able to get to the squat a lot quicker. And at the same time, you're creating such great mobility within the hips, and you're warming the hip flexors up, which is what you use to pull yourself into the squat anyway. It's a great mobility drill. So that's why I added it into this talk, because it is a mobility drill, but also at the same time, you're training the hinge and the squat all in one move, okay? And guess what you bypass? What do you do with somebody who has a hard time squatting because of ankle mobility issues? You deadlift. you hinge. That you're still able to get them to hinge and still move their hips and still teach all these nice concepts that we teach about tension. But now you're kind of bypassing it, and you're kind of cheating in a way. You're adding the hinge, then you're adding the squat real quick, and now all of a sudden that student is squatting. And it's comfortable. So I've found this to be a great strength drill, but also I have a lot of students that have written to me saying this is such a great mobility drill that I use this in like as a warm up with my class. I do it as myself as a warm up before I squat. And the idea of pulling your hips under, it is an advanced topic, or kind of a hard idea or concept to understand, the idea of pulling into the squat. But that curling of the bell is not just a curl. You're not just training biceps, but as you curl, you're getting your body underneath that load. And that is teaching you a lot of important strength concepts that eventually you'll learn later when you get into maybe front squat or back squat with a bar and stuff like that. Cool. Awesome. All right. If Finn, have you used this? Have you tried this? Kevin, have you tried this?
I'll let Kevin ask a question there, I think. Before I answer that question, actually, Paul Veronica just wrote in that he just wants to reiterate how good Indian clubs are. He did Phil's workshop. We done a workshop last December, I think.
So yeah.
And to be fair, Paul does use them all the time, and then every time that he's in the gym here doing kettlebell training, he's always the one who's me and him are near going toe to toe to get the Indian clubs off him. But I do use this drill. I have used it from whenever I done your DV8 cert. I actually have used it with some of my online members and some of my gym members, and it does help. I have actually put people into this position. I have tried this drill on people, as well as trying the usual way that I was taught through Dan John, and seeing which one works best depends on the person, because you know yourself, some people take the certain movements better than others. And I would actually show both as a starting point whenever I'm teaching the squat at the very start, just to get people feeling what they feel is better. So yeah, I have used it. Yes. Awesome.
Okay. Yeah, because yeah, go ahead.
No, yes, go ahead there. I was thinking Kev was going to ask a question.
It was more of a feedback from what Phil was saying for a question wise. I use this as well too for myself and for my clients. It's a great mobility drill, great warm-up drill, and a great way to introduce people, especially with counterbalance is what I figured out as well too. I find that a lot of people have a hard time understanding how to get underneath the weight, and center of mass for the bell is quite different from, a dumbbell and in regards to the goblet style. So I use it as a great way to transition from dumbbell, whether it's a goblet squat or into a single arm rack position, double kettlebell rack, and then eventually to the barbell. So it's been great overall.
Awesome. And here's the thing too, you as a coach, you may have to always kind of address things or attack things at a different angle. So everybody's going to be different. Everybody's going to learn different. So maybe the combination between this pattern and the goblet squat is a great way to kind of combine and get the idea of what the squat is all about. So, you know, and that's in my opinion, I think really truly learning how to move well is allowing somebody to be in these positions and figure out what feels right to them. Because, you know, you may know a lot of different things, but you're not in their body. So you don't know how things feel. You can only ask questions and have them give you feedback, but I want them to teach me, right? I want the student to teach me what they're feeling like, and that helps me become a better coach. And same as if you're not a coach and you're practicing this as just a student learning how to squat, this is an opportunity for you to learn, how do you move? What positions work for you? What doesn't? Hey, I didn't know that. Some students will say to me, I tried this and I didn't know my stance in my squat was narrow. I thought it was wider, but now it's a narrow and it feels better. Great. That's your squat stance. And that may change over the years, but that's it for now. That's what we're going to train. Yeah.
The one thing that as you're aware, is when you're teaching people the difference between a hinge and a squat. When you're teaching beginners, they don't know what a hinge or squat is. So trying to show them the differentiation between the two in one movement is a good way, because with this drill, as you initiate the movement by pushing your hips back, essentially you're hinging. So the person will know right away that they're doing that if you tell them that's what they're doing, obviously. And then as you're dropping your hips down, you're showing them or putting them in a position where your hips should be at the bottom of the squat. So there's one thing that I like to use is the dial of clock. You know, in a squat, you know, almost universally your bum goes down to 6 o'clock. In a hinge, almost universally your bum goes to 9 o'clock, back and then down. But putting somebody in a position in this drill shows them both positions as a 9 and 6 very, very quickly and very, very safely.
Yeah, excellent. And then those of you, if you have never tried this, try it. Let me know. I would love to get some feedback on how it felt for you. And if you have students, and how it worked with your students as well.
Katya has just said that she has actually done an Indian clubs course before with Brett Jones, which was good. Out of curiosity, Kat, did you do that with FMS, or was that actually on your Kettlebell course that you went to? And I think that he maybe do that as a one day afterwards. Can you come in and say? Yeah.
Within this drill or just the Indian clubs?
No, I'm on about not you, Kev. You had your moment. I'm talking about Katya.
All right, good talk. I'll see you in a bit.
So Katya had done hers with Strong First. So I'm thinking that Brett must have done it as a day after or so. Yeah, all good.
Excellent. Very good. Keep using them. Keep
using them.
Excellent. So here's the other thing. The last thing I wanted to discuss was the farmer carry. And I hope all of you have done farmer carries at some point, because so many different benefits to the farmer carry. And it's a simple movement to perform. You don't need equipment. You just need some weight. That's it. And the weight, and especially during this whole pandemic, when a lot of people are doing virtual training, the farmer carry was always something that I used in our virtual sessions. Grab something around the house, you know, something that's symmetrical that you can hold, gallons of water, whatever the case may be. Anything that's going to be able to, that makes you feel like you're lengthening your arm, is enough weight for you right now. Now, eventually, as your grip gets stronger and your posture becomes better, you can start loading that up heavy, or you can do an asymmetrical load where you just have one bell on one side and you're walking that way. So, yeah, the farmer carry, you would think, how's this mobility related? Well, number one, it's working posture. It goes back to posture again. Not only does it help load the body, so the student kind of can get a sense of how it feels to have some tension within the body, and not only does it help with grip, which is a huge factor in overall strength, but we have to stay upright, right? And what does upright mean? So let me stand and I'll show you. Simply staying upright means my head is pushed back this way. You're not forward leaning with the head or looking down. Your shoulders are back, so my head's on top of my shoulders. My shoulders are on top of my hips, right? My hips are right on top of my feet, right? So I'm not hinging. I'm not leaning forward this way. My shoulders aren't rounding. My spine's not flexing. My head's not going this way. So everything stays nice and upright. So before I ever have anybody walk with the kettlebells or whatever they're using, I have them find this position first and just stand there and hold the bells and let the bells lengthen your arms. So the other aspect of this is, if I let the bells lengthen my arms, what is it doing to my neck? It's pulling all the tension away from my neck and lengthening my arms. So I'm using my armpits and my lats and my hips to hold that load, right? I'm not relying on this. If you give somebody, most people, something to hold, instinctively they just shrug whatever they're holding up like this, and now they have tension in the traps and the neck. We want to get away from that. So the idea of pushing the bells down or letting the load pull my arms down and lengthen my arms will increase, will get rid of all the tension in the neck and the shoulders, and at the same time help improve posture at the same. So this is a mobility exercise in my opinion. And again, I use it every single session. Everybody always walks with bells in the session. And it's another way to reset everybody's posture. And guess what? It's another way to kind of let people know how bad their posture is, because once you load it, things might get worse. They might go like this and might have a hard time holding that weight up. Because maybe their upper back muscles are weak, or their erectors are weak, or whatever the case, or their grip's weak. So it's also a way for me to assess, all right, let's see what's going on in the body. Here, hold these bells, try to stay upright. And for some people, that is enough, just keeping them in one spot, not let alone walking with them. You don't even have to move. You can just hold that and focus on your breath. And now you're working mobility and posture.
So,
yeah.
So Katja's asked a really good question, Phil. Sorry to interrupt you there, but
no, go ahead.
So she asked, so Katja has asked, does the benefit change if the bell is heavier or once doing farmer walks? So I'm assuming that question is, does the benefit of what you're talking about, mobility and postural benefit, does it change if the bell gets heavier?
Yeah, great question. So depending on the person, because you're going to be limited by their grip. So you can only go to the point where it's such a good question. You don't want to give someone a bell that's heavy enough that all they're thinking about is holding that bell, because now they're thinking, they're like, I'm going to drop this bell. Now you're not working on posture anymore. You're just surviving the movement, right? That's different. And you don't want to give somebody a bell that's super light, because then they're not going to feel anything, and they're going to shrug it up and walk, and they're not going to get the benefit of it. So you have to find that weight that's sort of in between, that they have to think about moving or walking. They have to really think it, and they might slow down their pace, which is okay. And I have a lot of people just walk up and down this hallway here in my facility. And I can watch to see how they move. Are they moving left to right like this? Are they walking like this? Are they able to keep pretty steady? So the load will, as their grip gets stronger and their posture gets better, yes, once you start loading it up more, I think that now you're going to start feeling more in the core, the obliques, the intercostals, all these muscles that kind of have to hold you up from going like this and walking this way. Right? Those are those stabilizing muscles that keep you upright. So yes, as that person gets stronger grip-wise, the heavier loads will change the movement. But in the end, you're still asking that student to be able to maintain that posture the whole time, whether they're walking with one bell or two bells. So hopefully that answered the question. Good question. Really good. So you have to find that medium weight. That's the key. And if you're not a coach and you have a variety of bells at home, figure it out. Grab some bells, see what feels super heavy, what's too light, and then try to play around what the in-between weights are that really makes you kind of think about your movement. Now, the other thing I'll add to this, you don't even have, I would say the progression would be having the student hold the weight and breathe maybe 15 to 20 breaths in the belly and see if anything changes. If they can do that, then you can start adding in some marching in place. So now you're asking the student to hold the bells like this, right? And now I'm doing single leg stance now, just marching in place, and see what the weight shift does and see if anything affects the posture as my knee goes up, right? Or am I able to maintain a nice long spine as I move my knees up and down? So that's another way that you can train your posture, but at the same time, you're also training single leg stance too. So there's a lot of things going on. And then you could eventually have the student walk with those bells to challenge to see if they're able to stay and walk a certain distance, right? So a lot of good stuff. And I always like to use movements that are multi-joint movements. So you're doing a lot of different things in one shot. You're not isolating anything specifically. So you're working a lot of different ranges of motion, and all these movements do that. And I always think of these as, it's hard as a coach because you're always trying to think as all right, what's the best cue? What's the best drill? But I'd rather you think, instead of that, I'd rather you think patterns and movements. Okay, I know that's hard to kind of think about, but like, for example, if you look at the Indian club, it's a pattern. It's a circular pattern. If you think of the hinge to squat, those are two different patterns that you're looking at, right? If you think of it as a cue or a drill, your interpretation of that changes. Does that make sense? You might think of it in a different way, but if you think of it as a movement pattern itself, I think that the way you interpret that movement, the way you teach it might be a little bit different. A little side tangent there. But so if you think about these mobility in general, these are three excellent ways to address mobility and posture at the same time. And it's a little unorthodox. You wouldn't normally think, oh, mobility is stretching. Well, maybe for some people, mobility is breathing. Maybe for some people, getting on a foam roller is good mobility work. Everybody's different. Do never assume that one thing is good for everybody, okay? You always have to, even if you're not a coach, you have to address things and kind of take the whole picture in, right? Instead of zeroing in on one aspect, because you're going to miss a lot of different things that happen.
But that's the beauty of mobility, is that it's so mobile in terms of its interpretation.
Yeah, it is.
Really, because like people think mobility to be purely just yoga or stretching, but as you have just indicated, it comes in many formats and many methods, and one size doesn't fit all. And mobility for one person, or a mobility method or principle for one person, isn't necessarily going to work for the other. But that's the beauty of finding. Exactly. That's the beauty of mobility, is finding what works for you and just sticking to it for a period of time. So that's a question I would get asked quite a lot personally. What do I do for mobility? But you have just hit it on the nail on the head there in terms of it's very individual. It's very much determined by you as a person and what your needs are, and what you can and what you physically can and can't do. Would you get that question you're asked to you quite a bit, Phil, in terms of what do you do for mobility?
Yeah, all the time. And I say exactly what you're doing right now. What I'm teaching you. I do my carries, I do my hinges to squats, I do my Indian clubs every day. And I may do more of one than the other based on what I'm trying to accomplish. If I'm doing more overhead work, I mean, Indian clubs are going to be not even part of my warm-up, they're going to be part of my active rest. So when I'm resting between sets, I'm using them. When I'm cooling down, I'm using them. So that's why I love it. It's not a tool that you can really overuse. You can when you start getting heavier. And then now you're transitioning to a whole different type of system. It's not the same thing as an Indian club anymore. I interpret Indian clubs as a way to use these circular patterns, but release tension. I'm not trying to gain tension. There's many forms of exercises I can put tension through my body. I'm trying to get rid of it. That's the idea.
But that's a great point you touched on there, because like many people here on this call, we all strength train and we all train with barbells and kettlebells, but we actually don't utilize our recoveries enough in between sets. But really what we're probably doing is walking around, or we are on our phone. We're stressed out from maybe everyday life. Exactly. Okay, yes, that's just reality at the end of the day, but trying to use mobility as a method to almost bring more yin to your yang is going to be a big benefit.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, you know, play around with these movements, play around with the movement. I know that the Indian club it might feel a little awkward without a club, but I think you'll find that just using your arms and making the circular patterns with your hands and your arms you're going to feel a difference in the shoulder already just by doing that. And
I definitely think we should, over the next like load of months or so, Phil, we should definitely get you back and do a specific Indian club workshop. Maybe like a few patterns one day.
Absolutely.
Right in the chat there, if that would be something of interest, right in the chat. So we can I know there's only a few of us here, but I know for definite the overwhelming majority of my other members would be definitely up for it. And as Katja has said, most of the people here who I coach online aren't most of them are coaches, but even nowadays we do spend a lot of time sat down on desk with their shoulders rounded. There's some others there who aren't coaches, and they would work from home right now, and they're spending vast amount of time sat at a desk all day, and then they go from sitting at the desk all day to sitting on their sofa all night to going to bed.
And by the way, these are things that you can do in your office. Like I mean, you don't need a lot of equipment for this stuff. It's not like I have to go buy more stuff. This is something you could do pretty easily. So it works. It works.
Good.
Yeah, and go ahead.
Yeah, I think we've got a bit of interest there. I'm sure me and you keep in contact, Phil, so I'm sure we'll get something sorted. But yeah.
And I'll finish with any questions. Anything else? That any questions about any of these movements? Okay. And let me just finish by saying that, you know, all of these things that I've talked about here are concepts or elements of my DV8 methodology that I've created. There's a lot of different elements to this. It's not just mobility. Mobility is addressed in my certification through Indian clubs and also like Hinge to squat and things like that. But there's a lot of other concepts that I talk about when it comes to strength training within the DV8 methodology, just to make a clarification.
That's probably my mistake there, because obviously I call this bit of I like to put a name to some of these. And
I like the name.
I like the name, the Holy Trinity of the DV8 system, but it's three like very minute things to do with your system, and I know that because I've actually done your course and I'm my friends and my chat a lot. But I just thought of something off the top of my head and I think I nearly put Phil in an early grave. But no. So
this was great. This was great.
Listen, Phil, on behalf of myself and everybody else here and who's here and the ones who'll more likely watch this on the recording, I just want to say thanks for your time as always, and forever the professional. And I appreciate everything you do and appreciate you as a person. So I'm sure we'll see you in the next couple of months again. Hopefully we can get the Indian club workshop sorted out. But aside from that, mate, thank you very much for everything.
Absolutely. Thank you for taking your time away in your evening and learning some things, hopefully. Thank you, Finn. I appreciate it very much.
You man.
Take care.